Dolly Martinez died recently, and if you watched her episode, you already know why nobody is completely shocked. That's a hard thing to say out loud, but Dolly's story was never really about weight loss. It was about a 25-year-old who expected everyone around her to carry her burdens. Her mother, her best friend, her doctors, even her own newborn daughter. Dolly was the most immature person to ever appear on My 600-Pound Life, and her physical weight was just one consequence in a lifetime of bad choices. But before we get into the choices that earned her that title, you need to understand what Dolly's daily life actually looked like. At 25 years old, an age where most people are figuring out their careers, their relationships, and their independence, Dolly couldn't get out of bed without help. She couldn't bathe herself, and she couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes before the pain became unbearable. She needed the help of two people just to get through a single morning. Those two people were her mother, Stacy, and her best friend, Cheyenne. Cheyenne was also significantly overweight, but she showed up for Dolly anyway, helping her wash, move around, and basically function.
If she needs anything else, I'd go and do it. I just love her like a sister. Me and I've known her my whole life, but I feel like I did in my heart.
Stacy went further. As Dolly's mother, she carried the weight of this in a way nobody else could. She described what it was like to bathe her daughter, and she didn't get through it without breaking down. Because watching someone you love be this miserable and feeling powerless to fix it is a specific kind of pain you can't explain. And then there's the food.
My relationship with food, it just made me happy. It still does. Food just makes me happy.
When you hear Dolly describe her relationship with food, it's hard not to feel a little sorry for her. Until you remember that two people showed up every day to carry the weight of her choices. Literally, no pun intended. And if there's any doubt about how deep this goes, Dolly loved food so much that she tattooed it on her arm. Nobody arrives at 593 pounds without a story. And Dolly's story didn't start with one catastrophic moment. It started with a slow accumulation of wounds that were just never treated. Her father left when she was 2. He was a drug addict, and her mother, Stacy, made the difficult decision to remove him from their lives. By kindergarten, Dolly had already been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, and bipolar disorder. And look, that's a genuinely difficult hand to be dealt, but it's also worth noting that plenty of people carry diagnoses like these and still make positive, healthy choices for their lives. For Dolly, they became the first of many excuses not to.
Dolly has always been a bit different than other children. And other kids are harsh and cruel. So I've always been the overprotective mother. Being singled out as the fat girl is quite uncomfortable. Her whole life has been that way.
By age 7, she weighed 120 pounds. By 15, she was at 300. The bullying that followed was brutal enough that Dolly dropped out of high school. She tried to rebuild through Job Corps, a free residential career training and educational program for low-income adults. But keeping herself clean became a struggle, and she couldn't hold it together long enough to see it through. She tried a restaurant job after that lasted for 4 days. She couldn't stand long enough to work a whole shift. She moved to call centers, jobs where she could sit. Those fell apart too. Each time there was a reason: her weight, her hygiene, or her mental health. And each time the solution, was the same: more food, less accountability. And then her father died by suicide. Now, he'd been absent most of her life, but in his final years, they were finally getting close. That door closing permanently, that's genuinely tragic. Nobody's arguing otherwise. But here's the thing: Dolly was already overweight before he died. His death didn't start the pattern. It just made it worse. So at 21 years old, Dolly had no job, no money, and nowhere to live. And in that moment of complete vulnerability, she met Ricky.
I had just turned 21, and that's when I met Ricky, the man that I married. Turned out we had something in common. He invited me to come stay with him in his bedroom at his mom's.
They moved into her mother's house. Dolly got pregnant, and they got married. For a brief moment, it looked like life was finally organizing itself into something manageable. It wasn't. Ricky became abusive almost immediately. And if that wasn't bad enough, he was also a feeder, someone who actively encouraged Dolly's eating and watched her get bigger. Only 6 days after their daughter Trinity was born, Child Protective Services placed the baby under Stacy's care. And a year later, a court awarded Stacy full custody. Both Dolly and Ricky had proven they were completely unable to care for a child. So, while Dolly buried herself in food, Stacy was left holding everything. raising a granddaughter she didn't plan for, caring for a daughter who resisted the help, and carrying all the consequences that weren't hers to carry.
She's the most precious thing you never... She's a beautiful child. I certainly didn't know 3 years ago I was going to be a mama.
Notice the pattern again. When life got hard, Dolly always handled it the same way. More food, less responsibility. Don't be like Dolly. Take responsibility and support the content you love. Subscribe to Living Large. It's the mature thing to do. Getting to Dr. Now's office meant a 6-hour drive to Houston, and Dolly complained for most of it. By the time she arrived, she was miserable. But that's the thing about Dolly. The misery never translated into motivation. She stepped on the scale, and the number read 593 pounds. Instead of any kind of accountability, Dolly is genuinely surprised at how that could have happened. Dr. Now laid it out simply. Lose 60 pounds in 2 months, and she'd qualify for weight loss surgery. A lifeline directly handed to her. She exercised, showed some early promise, and for a brief moment, it actually looked like she might take it seriously.
There's upper body that I have to do and lower body too. And I'm supposed to do them twice a day. So Cheyenne has been there a lot, and she's kind of like my trainer.
But when it came to the diet, Dolly had a very different attitude, and she didn't hide it.
My favorite. It is? Yeah. You can put in this cart.
Oh my God, Dolly.
I don't feel like these are changes that I can make for the rest of my life, but I do feel like I can do it for the short term. And when I go back to see Dr. Now for my next appointment, I really hope I get approved for weight loss surgery.
Her mother had just removed every temptation from the house. And instead of recognizing that, Dolly treated it like an inconvenience. In Dolly's mind, the diet was never a lifestyle. It was a performance, something to endure just long enough to get approved for surgery. She'd convinced herself that weight loss surgery was the solution, that once she was done with the procedure, everything else would just kind of sort itself out without having to do a single difficult thing. 2 months later, Dolly was back at Dr. Now's office. She stepped on the scale and weighed 576 pounds. A 17-pound drop in 2 months. Now, to put that in perspective, Dr. Now told her she could lose up to 80 pounds in a single month if she followed the diet properly. And yet she stood there genuinely convinced she'd done everything right. But when Dr. Now dug into exactly what was happening at home, the picture became very clear.
Mom, how are you doing with your eating habit?
It's just portion control. I'll put a portion on her plate, and then later on she'll go back for more.
The problem wasn't that Dolly wasn't trying. The problem was that she fundamentally didn't understand, or refused to understand, how food intake actually works. She cut out the snacks, the sodas, and the bread, but then she'd go back for a second serving, then a third, completely undermining every small win she'd managed. But instead of taking Dr. Now's feedback and committing to do better, Dolly requested something that perfectly summarizes everything we've seen so far.
Do you have like something that I could go to instead of going home that could help me?
Dolly didn't actually want help. She wanted someone else to be responsible for her progress. It was the same pattern as always. The moment things got uncomfortable, Dolly looked for someone else to carry it. And Dr. Now wasn't going to let that slide. Back home, things went from bad to worse. The tension between Dolly and Stacy reached a breaking point. Stacy wasn't letting anything slide. She watched what Dolly ate, questioned every meal, and pushed her to stay on track. And Dolly, rather than appreciate any of it, would lie straight to her mother's face just to buy herself a few hours of freedom.
I'll be back in a little bit.
Okay, love you.
Love you too.
But then, in classic Dolly fashion, she made a decision so baffling, it's hard to put into words.
It's been a week since I moved out of my mom's house. I fell in love with him again, all over again. And we, as an adults, we have boundaries that need to be set with our parents.
Dolly moved back in with Ricky, the same man who was abusive throughout their entire relationship and kept feeding her fried food just to watch her get bigger. Because nothing says, I'm committed to my weight loss journey, like moving in with the man who spent years trying to make you bigger. Dolly's priority wasn't her child, it wasn't her health, it wasn't her future. It was finding a place where no one would question what was on her plate. She chose an abusive man over her own mother and daughter, and that wasn't even the worst decision she made. 2 weeks after moving in with Ricky, his behavior became intolerable again.
He was back to his old and controlling ways, being crazy and mean.
And Dolly was back in a homeless shelter, and it's there that she met Philip.
So I met someone a couple weeks ago, and his name is Philip, and he's just about the sweetest guy you're ever gonna meet.
A man with no house of his own, surviving on a disability check, who offered to put her up in a motel. They moved in together almost immediately, and within a few weeks, Philip proposed, and Dolly said yes. By the time Dolly's next appointment rolled around, her life looked nothing like it did when she started. Dolly stepped on the scale and she weighed in at 566 pounds, a 10-pound drop since her last checkup 2 months ago. Unsurprisingly, Dr. Now didn't approve the surgery, and honestly, how could he?
If you want to show me that you're able and willing to make the changes you need to show me you have some stability in your life.
10 pounds in 2 months? That isn't progress. And beyond her weight loss journey, the life Dolly had built around herself told its own story. She was living in a motel, engaged to a stranger, and completely detached from the support system that was barely holding her together in the first place. That's not someone ready for a life-changing procedure. After months of appointments, arguments, motels, shelters, and every excuse imaginable, Dolly stepped on the scale one last time. The number read 552 pounds, a total loss of 40 pounds in 8 months. To put that into perspective, if she had followed Dr. Now's plan from the beginning without a single surgery, she would have been down 150 pounds already. Instead, she only lost 40. And she walked in genuinely thinking that would be enough to get her approved for surgery. But before Dr. Now delivered his verdict, Stacy spoke. And when she did, you realized that she had been holding this in for a very long time.
I was told that I'm too controlling. I've encouraged her since she moved in with me to not overeat and to not eat what she shouldn't and to focus on herself, emotionally, physically, all aspects of herself. And she promised that she would do so.
What I should have done.
And she did not. She has moved in and out of my home, in and out on her 3.5-year-old daughter, which is not good for the child.
That's a woman who gave everything and got very little back. Dr. Now's verdict was delivered without softness. The people who genuinely cared about Dolly were the ones she kept walking away from, and the ones who enabled her worst habits were the ones she kept running toward. At the end of this episode, Dr. Now said something that summed up 10 months in a single sentence.
So it seems like you cannot take responsibility for yourself and you expect everybody else to do everything for you.
Dolly expected everyone else around her to carry her life while she sat back and watched. And until that changes, nothing else will. Do you agree that Dolly is the most immature star that My 600 Pound Life has ever featured? Or is there someone else who takes the cake? And by the way, if you think 25 is young, you haven't seen anything yet. Click the video on your screen for the story of the youngest patient in My 600 Pound Life history.